All right, I am here with Tatiana and Jason from HealthyRoster, and I'm going to start with Tatiana. If you can give us a little bit of background about yourself, your profession, what you do, and then we'll go to Jason before we jump into our topic today.
Sure. Nice to meet you. Tatiana Chattoo. I'm a certified athletic trainer. I also have my master's in athletic training. I actually first started in the traditional setting, so I worked at a Division I university down in Virginia, and I got my feet wet there. I eventually moved on to the more, I guess, traditional physical therapy setting, where I was an athletic trainer in the physical therapy setting. I eventually moved on to the industrial setting where I was an on site industrial athletic trainer for 7 years. Got to see a lot, got to look at injuries, prevention, safety, recordables, and kind of now decided to transition over into the virtual world and the idea of providing virtual services of athletic training services to industrial sites and athletic settings all around the country.
Nice, and currently with HealthyRoster,
Correct.
and that's why we're talking today because I connected with some of your folks online actually, and we started talking, and I thought this was a really neat topic, especially now given the current state of where we are with the pandemic and things like that. I think a lot of businesses and safety professionals kind of open their eyes to, wow, there are more efficient ways of managing some things not so much, but and this is one that a lot of folks probably still aren't aware of that we're going to get into today. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And Jason, how about you?
Well, thanks, Blaine. Thanks for having us, and excited to be here today and talk a little bit more about what we're doing different in that safety world. My background started as a military officer, where safety is the word of the day. So everything in training and in our combat operations has a safety plan before you go out the door to try to mitigate the risks for your soldiers. And so, it's it's pretty cool to end up in a company whose main focus it is to keep people safe.
Mm-hmm.
And so Healthy Roster's been around for about 6 years, and started out as a mobile first application to help athletic trainers in sports better log track and communicate with parents and coaches and providers, and do it from the field. And a few years ago, we had industrial athletic trainers coming to us asking us to use their platform in the workplace. And we said, "What are you doing there?" And they said, "Same thing that I'm doing on the field of play is I'm preventing injuries and I'm helping people stay healthy and productive." And so here we find ourselves now. I kind of lead the charge into finding those new customers and helping them understand that with especially post pandemic, everybody's had a Zoom call or a telehealth call, and they've
Yeah.
gotten familiar with it and comfortable with it. And so that's essentially what we do. And kind of the mission statement right now that we have is reinventing safety programs for scattered workforces, because all the safety professionals we talk to really truly understand the impact of the different on-site injury prevention programs that exist out there in the market. Yet 97% of industrial locations have 200 workers or less, and
Yeah.
it's not really economical to put somebody on site, for those locations or for late shifts. And so we're leveraging our technology platform that's tried and true into workplaces to really be the safety ally for safety professionals to spread that program across the country and cover all their workers at all their locations.
Now, and Jason, it's a great segue into today's topic because you kind of just touched on that, and that is, I my background, I worked in an industrial site. I had 7 manufacturing sites, and we had several full-time RNs, working on site. We had an on-site clinic. And the last year or so I was there, we started to transition to more of a telemedicine platform for the off hours mostly, because the RNs weren't there 24/7. And then we had some LPNs as well to cover, vacation time and things like that. I saw the benefit of having on-site care, on-site clinic, or at least that resource being available to the workers. But but then you're right. You go to the vast majority of industrial sites aren't big enough to justify the cost of that burden, right? Of having either a contract or hiring outright somebody. So
Exactly.
and because there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. You can't just say we're going to open up a clinic and then hire an RN. That actually is a medical program that has to be overseen by certain individuals. There are state requirements. There's a lot that goes into it. So let's get into this topic. And I guess first, you mentioned the vast majority of industrial sites. Do you have data or have collected data or have research or just from your experience, a HealthyRoster's experience in helping companies? What kind of data can you share about the number of sites that say they want this service but can't justify the cost? What problems or issues are they having in getting some people on site? Sometimes, do you have any info that you could share about that?
Yeah, sure. So, through polling of webinars where safety professionals, join our programs through our current customers, I could tell you that probably 90% of the safety leaders we talk to that have multiple locations, right? So, to be clear, like you started, on-site medical care, is the best in class as long as you have a large enough facility and you have the economic means to cover it. But 90% of the people that we talk to have locations that are smaller or remote or transportation departments where they're on the road all the time, where that's just not feasible. And so what we see is that typically there's 2, 3, maybe a handful of actual EHS professionals in that organization that are really there to coordinate the programs and then push the programs down to plant management or site managers or road managers. And, those people, their expertise is operations, production, and running the business side. And they care about safety because they care about their people, but it's not their mainline job. And I think you as a safety professional would understand, hey, best in class is having an actually trained EHS professional at every single site. And so that's the gap that we're trying to help fill is really be the proactive arm for safety professionals that can't be everywhere all the time.
Nice. And Tatiana, what about you? What are your thoughts on the sort of the misconceptions when somebody says, "Oh, remote consult or any kind of remote session, it's not going to be value add." Obviously, we know nothing beats having somebody there to assess you and get hands on. Nothing beats that. But given the limitations in budget constraints and just economies of scale, the pandemic, there's a whole host of reasons why looking at a remote option might make sense. What have you discovered, or what could you share from your expertise and background?
Sure. So I think I have probably maybe the best idea because I get to compare, the virtual part and also the on-site part. And I like to think about it like this. So, right, COVID hit, we went through a pandemic. Someone might say, well, it's better to be in person at a hospital or an urgent care or wherever. But what did they do? They had virtual visits with their doctor. Now, maybe it wasn't 100% as good as it maybe could have been in person, but at the same time, they still benefited. People were still able to share what they were experiencing. They were able to discuss pains, aches, things that are going on in their body, how they're feeling. And the doctor is able to then take that and apply what he thinks, whether it be medication, whether it be, whatever the type of diagnosis that he should be giving, he's able to kind of give that to them. I think the same thing kind of happens when we look at virtual athletic training on site. So no, you may not have someone there full time who's able to kind of see you in person, but a lot of it is discussing what you're feeling, what you're experiencing. So it's the same concept. And whether you're there or whether you're working virtually, you get to kind of hear how the employee is feeling. You get to discuss what the employee did. And a lot of it in the athletic training world is verbal. So you are, discussing what they did to injure themselves, how long they've been in pain, what they've done for it thus far. Have they ever experienced it, previously? So when it comes to continuity, the issue lies where you might have someone on site and maybe they're there for a month or 2 months or 3 months, and now you don't have someone for a couple of months, and now you have someone new here for maybe a couple of months. If you're lucky, maybe you have someone there for a year, but it can get pretty convoluted. So I think that having that virtual piece where you're going to have that company that's there 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, and the employee, especially at these smaller sites, in which I've seen, you have a lot of veterans, veterans in the sense where they've been there for at least 2 years, 6 years. A recent site that I visited, the average tenure was 12 years. And at the larger sites, I see that they have a bigger churn. So they have a lot of, very people that are there for a couple months. Maybe they need to earn a couple extra dollars. But these are careers for some of these smaller sites. So I think having this virtual entity really does help with keeping that continuity and having that reliability and dependability of a health service to help these employees that are going to be there and are true to their job.
So let
Blaine,
me ask.
Blaine,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. One quick thought to that too. I think the distinction is when people think about a virtual service versus on-site medical care. We're really focused largely on the preventative elements.
Okay, that's what I was going
So
to ask you.
yeah, because if it's an acute medical issue, we're not going to say, hey, bring the guy with the sliced open leg to the kiosk so we can evaluate it. We're going to say, these are minor injuries. And if you think first aid's appropriate, then that's the time to interact at our triage layer where you get an industrial athletic trainer to evaluate self-care and first aid. If it's acute medical, they should go to see medical care.
Right. So that was going to be my question. So great segue, Jason. So from your perspective, let's unpack that a little bit. We now know what it is not. It's not for acute, medical or emergent cases that are emergencies that you would need to get stitches, or you obviously need to get seen, right? So what percent of or do you have a sense of what percent of injuries that you see that HealthyRoster deals with actually fall into that category? And what percent is a service like HealthyRoster or that kind of approach actually benefiting in reducing sendouts? We call them sendouts, right? Even if they come back and like, yeah, they said I'm fine, just needed some ice, or just, um, what's the benefit there? So maybe the data is going to convince people like, oh, wow, this is probably not what I thought it was. This is probably something that could benefit us.
Sure. So using Safety Council data and other sources, typically the number says 69% of workplace injuries are musculoskeletal related. And what we've come to learn is that 50 to 75% of those can be avoided with better preventative care, where you identify soreness and pain and complaints early enough that it doesn't progress into an actual recordable or claim.
So we're talking about upwards of 50% or so preventing cases from being recordable altogether through early intervention or taking care of them on site. And I would agree. I know a lot of injuries. Let me rephrase that. A lot of recordables are simply, they go to an urgent care. Maybe they're a doctor, but maybe they're not in industrial, occupational medicine. They don't understand what the worker has to do. It's like, oh, you work in a factory? Yeah. You need to stay home for a couple days, and when we look at other physicians looking at that, other providers would take a look at that and go, oh no, you should be able to go back to work. Here's what we want. Here's what we would recommend you do. So there's those cases, but these early signals you said of like early pain, discomfort, like this is kind of bothering me. If there's no resource there, they're less likely to say anything. And then it does progress to the point where it's too late for intervention. They have to get seen. And now it's treatment, medical treatment. And now we have a recordable. So you're saying a vast majority, almost 50% can be prevented?
Yeah, and that stat comes from the National Athletic Trainers Association study of industrial athletic trainers' impact on the workforce a couple of years ago. So they actually
Nice.
went to on-site injury prevention places where ATs were being used. And so just think about how much more of an impact that can have for locations that never had on-site care. And it can be
Nice.
pretty profound. And the impact's real too, because like you were just talking about, if you go to a medical care clinic and they do refer you to a specialist, the average days of missed work is 11.
Yeah.
And so the cost of that is really large because they got to find somebody or pay somebody overtime to cover you that production job. And that person is usually out because they're waiting for the appointment, because now they can't go back to work until they're
Right.
cleared. But the first aid might have handled it when they finally see the specialist and go, this is really a stretching soreness or a repetitive motion problem. And so that's where we are really focused, is don't let those things progress to an injury that need assessment. Let's proactively engage the workforce and say, here's how to do these movements correctly. And then we survey them often through our interactions and say, are you experiencing soreness? Let's talk.
Yeah.
But about
Excellent.
80% of our engagements are non-occupational health soreness and pain. Only a small element come to us for actually that first aid care before they seek that medical treatment. So most people are just trying to keep themselves productive and at work and on the job.
And Tatiana, that what he's talking about there, just the added benefit of, the impact on the workforce. So you were on site, so you
Right.
can speak to both sides.
So
Just
with
having somebody there, knowing somebody's there, can have
right.
a significant impact on the culture, the working culture.
It does. And, I actually believe that 69% is a low on the low end, because on site, that 69%, those are the people that are actually reporting to you. So
Yeah.
there obviously is a percentage of people that maybe they think that they can handle it on their own, or it's something that's just going to, go away with time. So, maybe, and again, I'll go out on a limb and I'll say maybe there's an additional 10% of employees that didn't actually give us the opportunity to address these issues, the soreness, the pain, the aches. Or even a tiny little cut. A tiny little cut can actually progress into, an infection or staph or something like that. So that 69%, it actually is low. And I feel like it's probably closer to 80% when it comes to, being able to actually address these people.
Yeah. Nice.
So another note too there is, when do you think most people recognize, when is the pain worse after a day of work? When they get home from the job, right? And in current on-site injury prevention or any injury prevention programs, there's no real at-home care. You have to call your own doctor, pay your own copay, take time off work to go to those things. And in a virtual environment, they can talk to an industrial athletic trainer 24/7, whether they're at home or at the workplace, because we cover everyone all the time. And so we have a lot of people chat in saying, man, my back was sore today, but when I finally sat down 2 hours later, I could barely get up off the couch. And we can help people like that too.
Excellent. So Tatiana, I noticed your dogs, you have two?
Gosh, yes. 2 dogs. Sorry.
Are they young? Are they little? I
Yeah,
see one.
actually, if you want to,
Yeah.
he's,
Oh,
he's 3 months today, and she's about 5 or 6 years old. We adopted her.
okay. So
He just woke up and
pit bull mix.
play. Yep, both of them.
Yep. We did a pit bull rescue. We fostered for a local pit bull rescue here as well. There's just such, just the breed of animal themselves are so like eager to please people, which makes them susceptible to abuse. But they're just they're smart. They're so easy to train, and they're just the cutest little puppies. We had them little. They would give us 2 at a time to foster.
Yeah, the
Just
potty training,
tiny
it's been
little-
tough.
Yeah. Yeah, they're tough. They like to play. So,
Oh.
all right. So, release the hounds. I say, I don't care. If they jump around in the background, that's entertainment. So, but so we were before I got distracted with puppies, which it happens. The one thing that's I guess not a shock, but it still surprises me a little bit about safety professionals is this one, they I don't think I can benefit from something like this because we don't have those types of issues, or we don't get a lot of complaints about this. And what surprises me is that most places, especially industrial settings, do experience these issues with aches, pains, and just the whole repetitive motion things. It's more to what you were both just saying, is it goes unreported, because there isn't a mechanism in place for this. There isn't a resource for them to go to get help, and because we aren't trained in this, a lot of us, we don't know where to start. So do you do work with, like, when you either one of you can jump on this one, when you have a new client that signs up, where do you start with them, Tatiana?
Go ahead, Tatiana.
Sure.
She's our on-site expert, so I'll let her take this one.
So
Okay.
oftentimes we like to share with them like kind of what we do with our virtual services. So prevention, like Jason had previously stated, that's our initial goal. Prevention, and then of course our health initiatives. So with our health initiatives, that also obviously coincides with the prevention. So prevention, we do job site training where we do ergonomic assessments, which we all know that's ultimately where things start when it comes to the on-site piece of people getting injured, people getting hurt, whether it be acute and or chronic. And then, of course, with our health initiatives, looking at, people getting the proper amount of sleep, people getting proper nutrition, people just getting activity, looking at blood pressure, looking at diabetes, getting their blood work done. People go years without having blood work done. And then all of a sudden, here they are with numbers that are astronomical, and they wind up having a stroke while they're on site or at home. Either way, it's horrific. So we like to address things from kind of those angles. And then, of course, dealing with things once they actually do happen on site. But that's actually probably more of our tertiary initiative, because those other things actually happen so much more often and so much more frequently.
And I'll add to that too. I mean, the other problem that we saw for scattered workforces is lack of personal touch for those remote employees, right? Because safety leaders, there's not enough of them to go around. So they have to go visit different sites, and they're only there for a day or two. Or they bring in consultants who are there for 3 or 4 days. They do some assessments, and then they print off a stack of recommendations and hand it to management and say, here's all the things that you need to do to improve safety here. And none of those people we've ever met are looking for another project to take on, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're busy environments. They work really long hours, really hard to accomplish their goals. And so we said, one of the problems is that there's no continuity in prevention programs from one vendor, one partner like us, to say, we're going to understand your job environment. We're going to have a professional like Tatiana come on site, take pictures and video. But then when we leave and go virtual, we're going to process all of that. We're going to deliver ergonomic assessments. We're going to put the recommendations straight into our program, and we're going to track every single task through to completion. So safety leaders, even they don't have to be on site to say, hey, this site's 96% task completion to deploy these ergonomic recommendations. This one's 15%. I'm going to go focus on helping the location that's only at 15% because they don't have enough people to do this. But then we take that learning and we put it into a training program, an interactive training module that we've built, where we'll then show you the right movements and the right stretches and the right behaviors to reduce risk in that job. And then we give that worker, and they're assigned those programs specific to what their job roles are. Instead of having just here are the 10 stretches that everybody does everywhere. These are the specific things that you need to know for your role. And that's
Great.
based
So
on what
it's personalized based on the on-site assessment, the photos, understanding the work and the way that they actually do the work. It's tailored to address those specific issues.
Exactly right. And
Nice.
then in the interactive part of it is once they're done watching the information, they interact with an assessment so management can see, hey, did the knowledge we delivered land? right? And then they don't get a grade, but it gives them some feedback and reinforcement on the important things to remember. And then
Nice.
we serve up another survey that says, are you feeling sore right now? And like Tatiana was talking about, there's a lot of soreness out there that doesn't get reported because these workers just believe that that's the nature of the job and it doesn't have to be. And so
Yep.
then when they acknowledge that soreness, they have the opportunity to schedule some time with Tatiana or the rest of our team and say, how can you help me?
Yeah.
And usually, I shouldn't say usually, almost all of the time, the feedback is, wow, I didn't realize a few simple pieces of
Yep.
advice that this athletic trainer gave me would be so profound. And Tatiana, you've probably got a million stories. My favorite story is we have a customer who had someone that worked all day on their feet, moving and lifting things, and had been dealing with back pain for a long time, just kind of the nature of the job. He had a 2-hour drive home. When he got home, he could barely get out of his car. And after working with us for 3 weeks, he said, I don't have that pain anymore. It's gone.
Wow. I just can't imagine all that physical activity and then like that you're sitting for that long on the way back home, right? And that's just not. I could just see how that compounds the problem.
Adding to what Jason actually had said, I think the one thing that we've also not addressed is, you know, just an employee being happier. So, a
Yeah,
happier employee, a healthier employee, a healthier employee is a happier employee. So,
and they're more productive.
exactly from the employer's perspective, which I'm not sure if we've really kind of tapped into it too much. We've been at the employees level, but yeah, so the employee is happier. So ideally, their health increases, their happiness increases. Chicken or the egg, I'm not really sure. Sometimes it could be either. But
Yep.
now the employer has an employee who's less likely to be injured, who's currently not injured, more productive, and probably will probably last as an employee for them much longer because one, they're not injured, right? So they're not going to be out. And maybe they actually feel as though their employer cares for them. Their employer cares for them
Yes.
so much, is so they're actually reaching out to some type of service, well, virtual, on-site, whatever the case is. But at some point, they're saying, "Hey, we realize that we need to address our employees and give them the benefit of some type of health resource." So
Hmm.
I think that that's one piece that's pretty significant in the entirety.
It is, and I often joke about it, but I mean, I kind of kid, but it's true, especially when I'm talking to non-safety professionals, when I'm talking to business leaders and those folks, is your workplace safety program and risk management program, all those efforts to reduce risk and prevent injuries, illnesses, that's an employee benefits program.
Yep.
You need to see it as an employee benefits program, like you do your EAP and the insurance that you shop around and try to get right size the packages for your population, and you want to tout all that. Keeping your people safe and healthy at work, I mean, it's great you're providing all that stuff for them to tap into outside of the work, right? But at work, where they spend a lot of their time during the day, right? And a lot of our time, adult life is spent at work. That's an employee benefits program. So when they start to see it as such, like you were just saying, Tatiana, is that the employer sees a lot of these benefits that maybe they either didn't see before, or didn't realize that their safety program could achieve that kind of metric, that return on low churn, low turnover, reputation in the industry, things like that. All right. And Jason, you wanted to add to that what we were just talking about.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is when we talk to safety leaders, that's usually the first person we talk to because they know these problems intimately. They know that they're under resourced in covering every employee on every shift. When HR and the risk analysts get involved, we've talked to hundreds of companies, and I can't tell you one that hasn't said that the MSK issues might be in the top 10, but not the top three. But when you switch it from number to cost, the
Mm-hmm.
MSK issues, because they're so costly and lost time and rehab and PT, they're always in the top three costs for an organization.
Yep.
And in the past, even though they've acknowledged this, and this has been a headline in safety for a while, there was not a solution to expand these programs to people that didn't have it, because the only thing you could do is put people on site either short term or long term, which is cost prohibitive for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking, let's say I'm just going to randomly pick a geographic area. Let's say North Dakota. You're at a facility that is maybe it's fracking or something like that, but they're pretty remote. I mean, there's not a lot of stuff up there. How are you going to get on site folks out there and to work there? I have to imagine the pool of professionals in that immediate geographic area is pretty shallow, right? To be able to draw this kind of expertise. So we now have the technology to bring those resources to bear on those remote sites. Alaska is another one. What about an oil rig out somewhere, right?
Right.
But you have a data connection and you have access to some of these professionals. So that's where my mind, as you were talking, I'm thinking, oh wow, this opens up a whole set of doors for organizations that normally would have just shrugged and said, yeah, well, we can't have that here.
Mhm.
It's not
Yeah.
available.
So you hit the examples, straight on. We have a customer who deals in concrete, and they have 200 people spread out over 25 locations in a geographical area where they're not consolidated, and they have
Yeah,
all of these injuries because their drivers are getting in and out of cement trucks and lifting the hood and doing maintenance and moving those heavy trowels kind of to position where it's going. And all of our connections with them are through the mobile app because they're on the
nice,
road all of the time. So
excellent.
that's how we reach them. And 86% of that workforce has engaged with us.
Wow, that's 86% engagement.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And
Yeah. I
that
mean,
industry is pretty rough, right? I mean, you're talking, and it's a stereotype, but I worked in construction for many years. The stereotype, I've heard foremen tell workers, "Hey, if your back's not sore when you go home, it's because you didn't work hard enough."
right.
So 86% engagement, that's huge for that industry.
And I'll tell you, it's, when you go on site and you talk about the benefits, and there's nothing more than a conversation that the employee needs to understand that's at their benefit here. They don't have to figure out how to use anything. The connection mechanism is really simple. And if you help just a few of those workers, they tell their friends and
They
go,
tell, yep,
yeah. And that's how it spreads because athletic trainers, could you imagine an NFL team getting rid of their athletic trainers?
oh, that's crazy.
I mean, they're on the field, what, a dozen or more times in a game, in a healthy game, right?
Yeah,
And those athletes rely on their athletic trainers to keep them productive, healthy, and playing.
yeah,
And some of these industrial jobs are way more intense
yeah,
because it's every day, all the time. There's no breaks. They don't have a team of physical therapists and ice baths at the end of at the work shift, right? I mean, they don't
right.
have the luxury of those things, and so that hard work really stacks up on itself. And athletic trainers, that's what they do.
So let's wrap all this up. I mean, this is great information. You've shared some stats with me that I didn't even realize. So one, if a safety pro listening to this episode or watching this interview is interested or always wanted to introduce some sort of whether it's on-site or virtual, some sort of service like this, but thought, we're too small of a site. I'll never be able to pitch this to leadership. They'll never sign off on it. Where can they go to get more information about what you all do?
So the first place to go is HealthyRoster.com.
Okay.
And there's a lot of information and ways to connect with us. And given we acknowledge that this is a new application, marrying modern technology with tried and true injury prevention practices.
Mm-hmm.
And so we offer a 90-day pilot because an organization isn't going to say, we're going to invest in this whole new thing and not sure if it's going to work long term. And so that's how we start everyone. And we're 100% on converting from pilots to customers because what they're asking their employees is it's too short of time to manage or measure impact from year-over-year recordables and claims impact. So they measure it by employee engagement and employee satisfaction. And we average a 4.9 out of 5 on both of those fronts, just like Tatiana said, because the workforce says, wow, my employer cares about me enough to give me this service that I can access at work or from home. And it's purely for me feeling better at work and keeping me productive and income producing. And I value that.
And Tatiana, on the backside, right, we see the lagging indicator of catching a lot of would-be recordables or send-outs
Yep.
before they get to that point. And
Sure.
so we see the business sees the lower comp rates, the lower EMR for workers' comp, lower recordability rate. You see all those added benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. All of these numbers that are dropping, obviously it's a positive for the companies. Healthcare in America, healthcare on job sites is no different. It's frequent and it's costly. So if we can find a way, in the world and at the industrial sites to have some type of initiative to reduce that, they're absolutely taking that up. And of course, early intervention, something that I used to use when I was on site as an example of kind of what we do, because a lot of people, employees, they don't necessarily understand when to reach out to us. And what I would say to them was this. So I go, have you ever been sick before? Of course, everyone raises their hand, 100%. Oh, of course, I've always been sick. Okay, so what do? Do you wait until you have bronchitis or until you're having to go to the hospital for you to address it? They're like, no, of course not. That's crazy. And I go, exactly. I go, so that's kind of like what we do. So, you're sick, you start to get a sniffly nose, maybe you have a little bit of a cough. What do? Maybe you have your grandmother's remedies, maybe you have some NyQuil, maybe you decide to stay in that Saturday night and not go out and party so that you can get some extra rest. You start to take initiatives in order to address what you have going on. Good percentage of the times you start to get better. Yes, there are those infrequent times where it does progress and you actually do need to reach out to a doctor or a hospital or what have you. But oftentimes you're able to kind of mitigate, the damages. I go, that's kind of what we do. Having that early intervention, seeing us when things first start or when you first kind of get a whiff of it, so to speak, that's really where we can make the biggest impact.
Nice.
Blaine, one more stat to drop for you on your question to Tatiana about the first aid consults. We had a client, or we have a current customer who came to us originally because they were seeing 3 send outs a month, and most for minor injuries or things that could have been first aid. We just completed our first year with them. And our main contact said in 2020, we had 8 recordables. In 2021, we had 1. And it's that first aid consult and that expert professional who evaluates, what's going on here. And does this person need to lose time at work and go to seek medical care? No, we can help them right here. And a lot of those send outs unnecessarily turn into medical care because medical professionals are phenomenal at medical care. And so if they think there's an opportunity to optimize someone's health, they're going to do it. And they're not going to think about the cost to the employer because they care about the patient most, right? And so we care about treating that employer the best that we can in their benefit without having to go wait in a waiting room, drive to a hospital, miss work, wait for another appointment just to be told they're fine and they can come back to work, because we've heard that frustration too.
Absolutely. Well, both of you, I can't thank you enough for joining me and talking about this important topic. I hope that any safety professional listening or watching this interview understands that there are resources within reach to be able to offer to your employees. And I would encourage you to go to HealthyRoster.com to learn more about that information. I'll have links to your LinkedIn profiles as well in the show notes, as well as a link to HealthyRoster.com. And I know we've been going back and forth via email, a bunch of us for a while now on various topics. So I'm glad we were finally able to get together and talk about this. And we'll be collaborating on some future topics as well going forward. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you both, Jason, Tatiana, for joining me today.
It's been a pleasure, Blaine. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Blaine.
Thank you. Thank you.